Hello, everyone. I'm glad and happy to have another young Indian with us, part of the Voice of the Young series. Right now, we have with us Aarya. Let's listen to her. Over to you, Aarya.
Thank you so much, sir. First of all, thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to express my thoughts and views. It's very rare that young people actually get a platform where they're listened to and not merely heard just for the sake of replying. So I'm very, very glad and very honored that I have this opportunity in the first place. Hello, everyone. My name is Aarya Pillai. I'm currently in my final year studying BSc Economics at the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics in Pune. And I would like my topic of discussion to be regarding my research journey, primarily what I learned from doing research, why I do it, and why I think it's a great avenue for young people who want to pursue research. My journey into economics, I always say, was an accident, but my journey into research never was. Growing up, I wanted to be an astronomer, an astrophysicist, because I was very keen to learn more about the stars. At that age, I didn't know what research actually was. I just knew that I wanted to discover more. I wanted to be like William Herschel, who discovered planets. And as I grew older, I realized that textbook physics was not my thing and that I wouldn't be able to stand the pressure of a collegiate physics curriculum. So in 11th grade, even though my parents said that humanities was my strength, I decided to pursue NEET. It was there that I understood a lot of things in perspective, that I didn't want a job which merely involved doing routine tasks. I wanted to be involved in the discovery of knowledge and the dissemination of knowledge. And dissemination of knowledge is a point that I want to get onto later on. But I wanted to be part of what we call research. And I was doing model UNing competitively at the time, and economics was a particular core area which I had to focus on. And by the time 12th grade started, both my parents and I were convinced that medicine is not the line to go. Economics was something that I had fallen in love with by accident through model UNing, and it was a perfect blend of mathematics and social sciences, which are two things that I really enjoyed. So, economics it was. So I say economics was a happy accident. But the research spirit was always there in me because whether I knew it or not, I'd always wanted to build on my knowledge base and not just my knowledge base. I wanted to build on the knowledge base of others as well. Because being able to, have more information at your disposal allows you to make more informed choices. And at the end of the day, living in this world is a series of choices that you have to make. And you have a better life the more informed your choices are. And this has been my guiding principle throughout. I recently told a friend of mine that economics, if I had to describe it to some sort of an alien species, they
Hmm.
would definitely write it off as some kind of a fantasy. Because unlike science, physics or chemistry, which are things that you can observe in nature, economics and the study of money is purely man made. It was man's desire to trade and man's desire to grow better in terms of some kind of a society or in terms of your personal wealth that actually led to the barter system and money being developed. Man wanted to satisfy their needs and wants. And what rules are there to this satisfaction?
Mhm.
So any alien would definitely say that economics is something that is some sort of a fantasy.
By the
And
way, why do you suppose that the aliens don't have such a system themselves?
well, I would say that the way they understand economics would be different from the way we understand
Okay.
economics. So for them,
Okay.
for how we understand, I mean, one of my favorite books, and this is one of the reasons why I took economics, is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
And one of the sentences in that book talks about how aliens from, outside our solar system observe the Earth and notice that people's happiness or sadness depended on the movement of little green pieces of paper, which
Yeah.
was very odd to them.
Uh-huh.
And that's when I realized how important these little green pieces of paper actually were. So, believe it or not, economics research was the way to go. I was very happy that I chanced upon an economics research institute because it is very rare in the Indian system that so much emphasis is placed on research. In a country which is so increasingly competitive in terms of jobs and placements and who earns more, very less focus is actually given on building good researchers. Most people who are interested in research end up going abroad to pursue their research, which is a very sad reality of India because India wants software engineers. India does not want economics PhDs. At least that is what the idea that is what the idea is that is given to young students who are put into coaching. So following this path was a no-brainer for me. But whether economics was the right choice still lingered. And it is through my research journey that I actually fell in love with economics. While most people fall in love with economics and then fall in love with research, I was already in love with research, and it was research that helped me fall in love with economics. So, my first research project was as a research assistant, and we studied healthcare markets in India. I did not know what a research assistant actually, what job a research assistant entailed. I just knew that I would be collecting information and I would be helping someone write a paper. And I had read plenty of papers up till then. So I had a general idea what these papers talked about. But this was a very, very new topic for me. Given that I had studied a decent amount of human biology and I understood health, writing an economics paper or being involved in this process was something that I was actually quite nervous about. Because what if I made mistakes? That is when I realized that being a student, your job is primarily to make mistakes. Why? It is because from these mistakes that you learn. And it is when you learn that you're able to implement better things in the future. If someone never ever made mistakes, when they get to a position where you're not allowed to make a mistake and then you do, it tends to be very costly. But as students, we don't have much responsibility on us. We're not like doctors whose every mistake is a life and death thing. We're not like economists where if we make a mistake right now, it could cause the country to fall into recession. So we make mistakes now and we learn. And that journey was very hard for me, but I'm very glad that research has taught me to fall in love with the process of making mistakes because you make a mistake and you get up and try again. So it has taught me persistence in that aspect. From that experience, I moved on to writing a paper with three of my classmates under a professor, and this was about sanitation in India. So we studied Maharashtra specifically, and we did a district-wise analysis. And this was where I was getting into hardcore data because this was the first time we used a very large data set. What we learned was actually quite contrary to what, you know, people in power or people in policy said. We found a lot of missing data, a lot of missing numbers, which could not be accounted to any form of sanitation. So what we had to do was basically we had to allocate or use the data and classify how many people were using a certain kind of latrine or how many people were using a certain kind of bathroom. And we realized that the totals did not add up. Even though we had n number of data points, when we did horizontal addition, it just did not add up. So we realized that there were people who were actually counted in the data set who were not accounted for in any type of sanitation or any kind of sanitary facility. Upon a lot of reading, we realized that other researchers have also faced the same issue. And this number could be attributed to the people who are openly defecating. So, in the paper that we actually presented to the Directorate of Economics and Statistics, body of the government of Maharashtra, we realized that open defecation was still a large problem. But this was a very, very interesting finding because of the implication that it had. As students, when we talk about societal change, the first thing that we learn in any social studies class is citizens have to question the government because the government is who gives us facilities. But in most of the papers that I have read, and one very specific paper actually made me fall in love with this process. It's a paper by this person called Long, who wrote about sanitation in India. He said that the problem was not a lack of facilities, but rather it was an inertia for societal change. When there were access to facilities, people still stuck onto tradition because of the shame associated with changing, the shame associated with breaking a tradition, and social stigma. Research helped me realize that a large part of the problem lies with the people complaining because we decide to blame everything on other people. And that is a very, very basic human fact. So, this particular enigma that I faced brought me into behavioral economics and the study of the fact that human beings are boundedly rational. Until then, our microeconomics textbooks always told us assume human beings to be rational because they want to be profit maximizing beings. But human beings aren't always like that. Because if they were rational, then open defecation would not exist if facilities were present. So, going into behavioral economics, I chanced upon the plight of MSMEs in India. And that was a third research topic that I did independently with a classmate of mine. We found out that out of the 64 million MSMEs in India, 60 million are registered under Mudra accounts. And Mudra scheme is a scheme for financing MSMEs as a part of the government of India. But out of these 60 million Mudra accounts, or 64 million MSMEs rather, only 25 million MSMEs approached formal sources of credit for either part or full funding for their MSME. 39 million did not even approach any formal source of credit, which is strange considering that there are 60 million Mudra accounts. We further studied disbursement rates. We studied how much each kind of financial institution was giving, whether it be NBFCs or commercial banks. And we found out that commercial banks, as expected, have a very, very low disbursement rate. That is, a certain X amount of loans will be sanctioned to them versus how much will be disbursed would probably be 1/10 of X. And the reason that sanctioned loans and disbursed loans are different is because a certain amount of loans will be sanctioned, yet they will try to find some kind of an issue with the MSME proposal that the person brings when you're going to ask a loan. And if when there is an issue, then they will stall the loan procedure. So the person does not end up getting their loan. It is understandable that commercial banks will be a little more tight in terms of the loans that they disburse because they want their defaulter rates to be low. But it has never exceeded 2%, while other NBFCs and public banks have all gone above 5% at some point. So, what was surprising is that there was a lot of information asymmetry. While these loans or the way these loans were designed was to help people set up help them set up MSMEs, there was a lot of information asymmetry that people did not know the right information and it was not exactly accessible on their website. So even though the internet helped disperse information, it really didn't reach the people it had to reach. So they were stuck with loan sharks or money lenders, and they're stuck in this vicious cycle of debt. This helped me realize that, again, even when there are facilities, if the information is not reaching the people, then who will use facilities? So I feel that research has taught me a lot about societal functionings in terms of the fact that there needs to be strong behavioral change in how we understand development and how we face development. And at the same time, there should be a pressure on policymakers to disperse the information, and not just disperse the information, make sure the information reaches people and is not lost in translation. A classic example of this is again listed in my favorite book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where the main character, Arthur Dent, gets his house demolished to build a bypass. And he says that he was not aware of this because one Thursday morning, contractors showed up with their bulldozers to destroy the house. The contractor said, well, it was in the local office for the past 9 months. You should have seen the local office anyway. And I think that is the same state of affairs that occurs all over the world. They say that this document or this notice has been published, but the news really doesn't reach the right people. Now, coming
Okay,
to research.
just a second before you go ahead. I want to ask you a question about your MSME paper.
Right, sir.
Did you notice any difference between the three categories, the medium,
Oh,
small, and micro?
definitely.
Could you tell
99%,
us?
99% of the MSMEs registered in India are actually micro businesses. A very small percentage are small, and there are barely any medium businesses. So, one aspect that we wanted to focus on in a later paper is to understand why people don't want to grow their micro businesses to a small business or a small business to a medium business, because that translation of growth is not happening. And we believe that a blockage in their capital structure is what is causing this to happen. That
Could you explain that blockage in the capital structure?
Sure. So what I mean is that you might get so there is a reason why nano businesses flourish in India, because the funding needed for nano businesses is also very small. So if I'm a farmer and I might not have much land, but I have maybe, let's say, 5 cows, I can sell the cows and start a nano business. So the energy that I require, or the amount of work that I need to do in order to gain the capital to start a micro business or a nano business is actually very small. So the rate of defaulting is also low, and financial institutions would prefer to give you that. But if you want to if you want to expand it to a medium business, from a micro business to a medium business, there's a lot of uncertainty as to whether this expansion will actually lead to any fruitful outcome, whether it was best to stay micro. So there are a couple of reasons for this. First is a lack of capital. That, for example, if I'm going to ask for loans and I'm going to say, yes, I have a small business, I mean, micro business, I want to make it a small business, I will obviously need more money than I have invested currently. But the people giving these loans would be very, very hesitant because the amount of money that you're asking now is quite large and the rate of defaulting is high. So it is easier to find possible loopholes in a sort of expansion plan and not give you loan on that account. Secondly, there's also a business owner aspect to it. A lot of people who start businesses, especially micro and nano businesses, don't come from very affluent backgrounds. So when they have a sort of steady source of income, which is a nano or a micro business, expanding it to a small business or expanding a small business to a medium business involves a lot of risk. And these people tend to be risk averse because you are so if I'm a farmer and I've started a micro business and the micro business has become successful, I might have left my farming job in order to continue the business. So if I've expanded it to a small business and the small business somewhat fails and I'm unable to pay the loan, I don't have any source of income and my entire family depends on it. So business itself is a risk venture. And what I've noticed is it is people with a lot of backing and a lot of surety that yes, their business will tide through the ups and downs of the economy who actually tend to expand their businesses. But otherwise, it's a sense of contentment that, yeah, my business is going so far, so good. I'm not going to risk
Okay, since you are an economist, last question.
it.
You know the difference between average and marginal.
Yes.
Okay. So now the average S and M are risk averse and complacent and okay with what they are. But is there any marginal farmer or owner, or are, what percentage would you say are the marginal who would say, okay, I can take the risk? You mentioned that there are some people with backing. I'm asking you to wildly speculate now. Is there, 5%, 10%, any who are, say, less prone to this risk averseness and contentment that you just mentioned? I'm just asking you to speculate.
So while, coming to a number would be hard, I can speculate that the people who would be risk averse would be one or more of the following types. One, they have a small household size. So the number of dependents on these business owner are actually less. They might only have a wife or a partner, or they might have just parents who will pass away due to old age. They don't have children. It is when the household size increases that the risk averseness also intends to increase. So that is one category. I would say that people who are into commercial farming compared to intensive subsistence farming also tend to be less risk averse, because commercial farming is more of a monetary venture and it is monetarily more fruitful. So they do have a lot of disposable income which they can convert into capital, while intensive subsistence farmers don't have disposable income enough to convert to capital. And I would also say that culture is a very, very important aspect in this regard. Because if my father had a micro business, the liabilities that he had compared to the liabilities that I have would be different. And this is to study descendants in business families, which is, I feel, a slightly under researched topic. Uh, if once I have taken some my father's business, for example, my goal is to not continue with the business. My goal is to expand it, because the business was successful enough to be inherited. So when inheritance plays a role, I feel these people will have a chance to expand their business compared to others. But unfortunately, the people in this category is very, very small. Household size is very small because of a lack of knowledge about birth control and population control. The number of children is somehow associated with, great status in society. Um, Commercial farming is not done by a majority of the farmers in India. Most of them are intensive subsistence farming who don't even farm on their own land. They farm on land that they have, you know, rented for generations.
Yes.
And the third category, inheritance, well, most businesses are too small to actually be inherited, that they tend to die out within the business owner's lifetime. So
Okay.
there is no business to inherit.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to interrupt with questions, but go ahead.
Um, I mean, I've talked quite a bit about what my research entailed, but I like to shed some light on my research journey and what I've learned from it. Well, most of the research that we read in economics, unfortunately, are written by non-Indians, and they're written from a Western perspective. It is good that development economics does see papers on Vietnam and increasing papers on India. But if you notice one thing, a lot of the papers in development economics that are on India do not use existing data sets, but rather rely on primary data collection. While data sets regarding development in the United States of America, for example, are actually quite widely used. The reason being that foreign data sets, that is, data sets in certain countries in Europe or data sets from America, are regularly updated and they keep up with the times. Whereas in India, research stalls quite frequently because of a lack of data. Uh, there are two aspects to this. First off is the availability of large data sets, like the census, for example. This is a very, very big issue because a lot of researchers don't have the ability to collect primary data in terms of, money or in terms of time. Researchers like me, we cannot go out into the field and collect surveys. So we rely on data sets like the PLFS or the NFHS or even the census. The issue with the census is that it hasn't been updated since 2011-12. So using 2011-12 census data to answer questions in 24 is going to be wildly inaccurate or lead to wildly inaccurate results, because the technological advancement and the cultural advancement that our country has seen within this 10 years cannot be assigned to a 2011-12 data set. It is not visible. So the sample in the 2011-12 data set is not representative of the current population. And having a sample that is representative of the current population is an extremely important thing when you're doing research in economics. So using the census is out of the question, which means that researchers like us are forced to do small surveys, small scale surveys of maybe 100 or 200 people, and base our results according to that. But again, we have the homogeneity issue and we have the issue of our sample not actually representing the data set. I wanted to do my thesis on the situation of gig workers in India. Gig workers are an up and coming topic in our country, so much to the point that Niti Aayog in its document could not exactly define what gig workers mean. They said that the definition is still up to debate because the economy, the gig economy, is changing rapidly. So, how can you put a definition to a landscape that changes so fast? Which is true in one aspect. If I wanted to do research on the gig economy in India, I would have to interview gig workers. And interviewing gig workers is a hassle because most of them are tied to some sort of a corporate entity and they have a certain X number of deliveries to make. The amount of money that they earn on these deliveries is also low. So the time that they will get in to talk to me would probably be very less. And as a student, it is quite unfeasible for me, and that too as a female, to go around in a largely male dominated sector asking people for data. So, all these are roadblocks for young researchers. Another issue that I face is the availability of data sets, but it being locked behind some kind of a paywall. People have realized today that information is king and that information rules everything. So, being able to monetize data is clearly one of the strongest income streams there is. But as students who can barely afford to buy textbooks, paying thousands of dollars for a data set is again simply unfeasible. So, students get into the habit of cold emailing. And so did I. I emailed many professors asking for research assistantships to be able to work on their data sets and the primary data that they have collected because they have the funds and I need the work experience because I want to know how research works. One such person that I met through cold emailing was the awesome Nishit Prakash,
Yeah.
who is a professor at the Northeastern University, and he's a professor of development economics. He wrote a very interesting paper, which I had studied in class and I had emailed him about. And he was very gracious enough to take 1 hour of his time to talk to me on video call. What he said was that a certain project that he was doing was, I'm not going to say the number, but he asked me to guess how much funding was required for that project. And I guessed a comparatively very meager amount. Very meager in terms of peanuts compared to what was actually supposed to be spent. It was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. That kind of funding is definitely not going to be available to students. So collecting primary data is an issue. And well, we have issues with secondary data in the first place. So contacting professors and cold emailing them is something that our seniors have suggested to us because, again, conducting research on your own terms is hard for a young researcher. When we cold email professors, what I have noticed is contrary to popular belief, people say assistant professors and associate professors, non-tenured professors tend to take in more students because they want to create more research. It was actually tenured professors who had 100% success rate in replying back to me. Any non-tenured professor that I emailed did not reply to me. And I had a decently large sample size. So the tenured professors all replied in the negative. They were quite optimistic, but they all said that we don't really have any slot available for a research assistant. And I've noticed that the reason for that is that I'm an undergraduate. I feel that in the research industry, people tend to look at your qualifications more than what you actually bring to the table. So if you have more if you as a student have more research experience or work experience than someone with a degree, people will still prefer someone with a degree because somehow a degree is equated to more knowledge.
Yeah.
When I feel that that is a very archaic and obsolete way to view the world. I've learned that my lack of having a 3-year degree or the paper saying I'm a certified bachelor's in this field has been a deterrent to a lot of opportunities simply because I'm a student. But research, like I said, has always taught me to be persistent. And someone else's no is not going to stop my work. And I think that should be a key takeaway for a lot of young researchers. I know a lot of researchers who work with professors and who have had largely positive experiences, and obviously there are negatives associated in this field, especially with credit. Students don't get the credit that they deserve, and that deters them a lot. But what I would like to share from my small experience in research is that these times will pass, and that the fact that someone else has said no is in no way a determinant of how good of a researcher you are.
Mhm.
Your skills are built by your own persistence and your own hard work. So even if you can't work under someone you want, there still are sources, resources, data sets that you can work on and practice and try and write. When you write and when you read and when you expand on knowledge, you don't have to write a research paper. You can write an article on, okay, so this is what I have learned. It might not be enough to write a research paper, but I can write an article out of this. The more you write and the more you learn, the more you will realize that what you learn in college is only secondary, and it is what you learn from real life experiences that actually matter.
Mhm.
Because college will say my macroeconomics professor had a very good habit of not letting us study the textbooks for the exam. He said the textbooks are your reference for theory because the world operates on some kind of theory or another, but theory wildly fluctuates. He wanted us to study RBI documents because he said that whatever the RBI is releasing as part of their press releases, they're all real life incidents and they're all based on what happens in the real world economy. So Samuelson or Mankiw is not going to tell you how to handle India when there is a recession. You're going to have to learn from people who have been in the field and who have experienced a recession, and you should learn from their mistakes.
Mhm.
All that the textbook will give you is some sort of an idea. Like, for example, in recession terminology, you might talk about, let's say inflation, or you might talk about jobs, unemployment falling. I mean, unemployment increasing. You will learn that from Keynesian graphs, but Keynesian graphs are not all, and that the what happens in reality is very different. So you might need a textbook to learn what unemployment is, but you can't use a textbook to solve unemployment. And I think that is one of my biggest takeaways from research, that what we're doing has so much practical application, and that real lives are depending on it. I used to think that being a doctor was the only way that you can serve the society, because as an astrophysicist, you're only looking at the stars, you're not looking at the people right next to you. But as an economist, I have a very unique opportunity, and fellow economists have a very unique opportunity because, like I said earlier, it is the little green pieces of paper that determine a person's happiness or sadness. And even if I wanted to be a doctor, if I didn't get the money for medicine, I would not be able to treat a person.
Right.
So, whether we like it or not, money does run the world. And being informed about how we handle this money can improve a lot of lives. And at the end of the day, that is what we should aim to do. We come from places of privilege, and a very good friend of mine taught me about John Rawls and the fortune of birth. We come from places of privilege, and being able to sit here and being able to talk to you is a privilege that millions of others don't get to have. So, in a position of privilege, you think about what it could have been if you were born somewhere else, if you didn't know where you would be born. Instead of making that fight any harder, which is what society seems to do now, we make that fight easier, and we give them the same opportunities that we have received, because in no way is any of the privilege that we're receiving a birthright. So, as economists, I think that should be the fundamental question we're answering. How do we improve human life?
Okay.
Not at the cost of other people. Because unlike, what most people say, that things are a zero-sum game, I would say that if there is internal change, and that is, I decide to change for the better, and everybody thought that way, economics would no longer be a zero-sum game. One person does not have to lose for the other person to win.
Okay. Thank you so much. Let me say you have totally validated my idea of
I'm glad.
floating this channel. The young people are very good. They prepare hard, they understand, and there can always be disagreement, but there's no point in agreeing or disagreeing. Let them speak and ask questions that only are follow up to what they're saying. So that it's not that you are leading them, you are just digging deeper. And you have just confirmed it. So thank you very much. It was an excellent piece of thinking and
Thank you.
analysis that you have done, and you presented it so well, eloquently. And anything else you want to add here?
Well, nothing much. I just want to tell my people who are in my area and at my level to not give up and to not take no for an answer. I think this should be one of those areas where you should never take a no for an answer,
Okay.
and that you should not be afraid to make mistakes, because mistakes are the best way to learn things. And, keep learning and keep exploring, because the world needs curious minds. So, what if it doesn't follow what, someone 50 years ago said? Times change, people change, and we need new thinking. So don't be afraid to research. We need researchers in all fields, regardless of whether you're in medicine or you're in engineering. We need researchers in all fields. And the myth about researchers not making money, I feel, is false. I've seen a lot of researchers making good amounts of money. So don't let other researchers take you for granted, and make sure that your work is cited as your work, because I feel that with this generation, we should stop the habit in academia to usurp other people's work. And at the end of the day, in this day and age of artificial intelligence, please don't chat GPT your research. Let chat GPT or any kind of an AI tool be some sort of a guide or a teacher that that helps you understand what you couldn't understand in a textbook. But let your research be original, authentic, and let it represent what you want to talk about.
Okay, wonderful. Let's end it here.
Yes, sir.
It's been very, I've listened very carefully and very happily that somebody at your age is thinking so many things and actually doing so many things, and so many studies. Okay, thank you so much. Let's end it here. I'll be back with another young person or an expert soon. Bye till then. Bye, everybody.